For whatever reason, I found a picture of Joe with hair on the top of his head in my office.
In your office?
Yeah,
It
I've
must have
had
been an old photo.
yeah, I needed more file space for like all this, like the stuff for the city, like all that kind of stuff. And so I was going through some of the old files that had been at my desk for like the last 13 years, and and I found one with Joe, a picture of Joe with hair on the top of his head and no goatee. It was crazy. I was like, who is this guy? So I'll keep it for the retirement party. All right, so this is episode 104 of Farm to Markets. Today we're talking about the Barron's Roundtable, the Bitcoin ETF, full body MRIs, road signs, and determining what your pets are saying to you. All right, so the Barron's puts together like a team of experts that they call like a round table. And in this case, they put a bunch of financial, like a board of financial people together, and they basically just ask them what they think is going to happen for 2024. So the members of the 2024 Barron's Roundtable expect the stock market to disappoint, with the index delivering returns of either -5% to +5% for the year. Um, they don't see a ruinous recession, and they expect the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates at some point during the year. The main worry is that stocks are too richly valued, leaving little margin for error. What do you think of their prediction? What do you think of that prediction?
Well, if we're just talking about stocks, I think they might be a little bit right. The reason being, I think we mentioned this maybe a month ago that stocks were starting to price in several rate cuts from the Federal Reserve coming up throughout this year, and January's CPI number kind of took everybody by a little bit of a surprise. And if February or December's number in January, so January's number that we'll get in February and February's that we get in March are again higher than anticipated. I'm not sure the Federal Reserve is going to be as gung-ho to cut rates as maybe they initially thought. CPI is at 3.4 right now, and if it stays in the 3.5% range, I guess what the Fed's going to have to figure out is how serious they are about actually fighting inflation down to roughly 2%, or if they're willing to just kind of let it hang out where it is, or even go a little higher and leave and cut rates. As soon as they start cutting rates, inflation is going to kick back up anyways, almost certainly anyways. So I think if their broad prediction is that stocks are going to kind of muddle along, wondering whether or not rate cuts are actually going to happen, then yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And so I think until we get some more certainty on that from the Federal Reserve, I wouldn't expect a whole lot of stuff.
I think that it's kind of like just like financial porn. It's good stuff. I like to keep up on all these these panels and what people are predicting is going to happen. What economic factors are influencing the markets. But honestly, it's just that. It's finance porn. The article mentions a lot of great insights, and in a vacuum, they're probably correct. The problem is that predicting the annual market outlook is like writing the farmer's almanac. There's so many changes that could change their outlook. You're better off thinking that there's going to be some really hot days, there's going to be some really cold days, and there's going to be some really wet days, and then going from there. We closed out 2023. There was a 9-week winning streak for all the major indexes. So prices right now, they're pretty high. And as a result, stocks are going to need to show some solid earnings to justify those premiums. So I think if stocks can still turn a profit, people are still going to invest. But like I said, no one really knows.
There is actually zero predictive value in these predictions. I have actually participated in these roundtables, very similar to this one that Barron's put on in the past. You basically they give you a plane ticket. They put you up in a really nice hotel. You get to rub shoulders with very interesting people who've probably written books on this kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, their predictive powers are zero value to anybody out there, but it just makes for good print in Barron's.
I agree with that comment, but I mean, if you're going to predict something be wrong, like why not, why not go big? Like, give us like a really bold prediction. I mean, this seems kind of like milk toast as far as prediction go. I mean, they're probably, if I had to make a prediction and I want to be on the safe side, this would probably be it. But I mean, if you're going to be wrong anyways, like, go big or go home, I guess. I guess when Bill Gross used to be on the Barron's Roundtable, he used to make some pretty bold predictions. And from what I've read, that this is a pretty safe prediction. But yeah, but you can't. There's like Joe said, there's no predictability. You can't predict what the market's going to do. And I think some of the banks like J.P. Morgan and Morgan Stanley have actually revised a lot of their recession calls throughout 2023, just because things change so much, and they realize that's not going to happen. So. All right. So the big thing in most of financial media over the last couple of weeks here has been the first Bitcoin ETF was approved. Yay! So despite the problems that they had on Twitter, it was eventually approved. And James McIntosh of the Wall Street Journal believes that Bitcoin ETFs are just going to exacerbate the problems that are already prevalent with Bitcoin. What do you think?
So if we're talking about the extreme volatility of Bitcoin, I'm not entirely sure that they're going to solve those problems. If it makes it easier for big institutional investors to get a hold of them, pension funds or something, then maybe that moderates their performance a little bit. But overall, Bitcoin's already extremely volatile. I think it was in the article that you sent us, Tom. And if it wasn't, it was a very similar one. That Bitcoin does not perform like gold. Its performance is more closely related to the ARK Innovation ETF, which is like very speculative, high risk, bleeding edge kind of tech companies or other space companies, stuff like that. So in terms of solving the other problems, like is it actually digital gold? No. Is it money? No. Already as of right now, I think the number was over 50% of all Bitcoin are owned by whales. So, wealthy investors or large financial institutions. And so ultimately what's happening is that Bitcoin is being assimilated into the financial system, which is pretty much the exact opposite of its intended purpose when it was created, which was to circumvent and get around the financial system. So I don't see the Bitcoin ETF solving any of those problems. I think if anything, it's just the death, or like the nail in the coffin of any idea that there's some kind of independent, rebellious kind of thing that's meant to get around the financial system and solve problems that it creates.
I agree with this article. I think it does exacerbate the volatility of Bitcoin. And like Alex said, it undermines the whole purpose of Bitcoin as a replacement or an alternative for fiat currency. You can view Bitcoin or any digital currency, two ways. You can see it as a capital asset that you only buy it for speculative purposes and to see growth on participating in it, or you can see it as an alternative to fiat currency. So more and more, I think the world is approaching this as a speculative asset, and more we're going to see less utility in it as an alternative for our fiat currency. So yeah, I agree. It's gonna exacerbate the problems.
If you actually believe that volatility is a problem, then yes, I agree. That's probably going to increase the problem. But in the investment world, you got to remember that volatility is the trader's friend, and that even though our firm tends to take a much more conservative approach to only going long, there's a lot of investors out there that want the opportunity to go short, and they trade on the volatility. In many ways, crypto has greatly disappointed. Like in prisons, a lot of times there's no cash, so they use cigarettes as a form of currency. Well, what's really happened is that they created Bitcoin to be currency, and now people want to use it like it's cigarettes. It's like they're using it for the exact opposite for what it was originally intended, and it's not fulfilling the goals for which it was created. But no, I think it'll increase volatility, but I don't think the markets as a group or as an institution cares.
You seem to know a lot about prison currency, but anything you want to share now that No, I don't. I don't even know if it's going to increase volatility that much because I think everybody who wanted to buy Bitcoin has already probably bought it. You can buy fractional shares of Bitcoin. Getting on Coinbase and buying, is not much harder than setting up like an IRA and buying like an ETF online. So I think anybody who wants exposure to Bitcoin has it. If you want to put some of your retirement accounts in it, now it's easier. But even that's not that, because you had the grayscale Bitcoin trust before that, so it wasn't impossible to get exposure to Bitcoin in your retirement accounts. So I don't think it's going to increase volatility that much. So I agree with the theme of this article, but I don't think volatility is going to be that, because I think people who wanted exposure to it have it. All right. So apparently a full body MRI or computed topography scans are being marketed by companies like Fountain Life, like Ezra, and some life-saving tools to find cancer, aneurysms, and heart disease years before the symptoms arrive. But many radiologists and cancer doctors, or oncologists as they're called, say that these scans don't make sense for healthy people with no symptoms or special risk factors. They say the scans seldom find dangerous cancers, but regularly produce false positives for things like non-carcinogenous cysts that don't pose health risks. Do you think you get a full body scan?
I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with getting one of these every so often. I think most people would take false positives over, missing a cancer a year earlier than they ended up discovering it and saving themselves a lot of misery. That being said, just reading up on these, so it seems like half good science and kind of half like snake oil salesman kind of sales pitches. Like they're almost too good to be true. But like I said, I don't have anything wrong with it. I would probably get one every so often. I think you'd have to watch out for getting them too frequently, because you might end up dosing yourself with enough radiation to create a problem for yourself. But no, I mean, I don't see too big of an issue as long as, you don't turn into a hypochondriac about it. So yeah, probably.
I like having options. So when I go to the store and I'm shopping for peanut butter, I like having more than one option for buying peanut butter. I think that's great. But what bothers me about this is a possible policy change, at the federal government level. I think it's important to understand that our healthcare, it's not a monolith. What works for one person may not work for another. And personalized healthcare, where an individual consults with their doctors and they make decisions based on their unique risk factors and health history, that's the key here, not any kind of blanket policy that might be pushed through a government mandate. So I think it's great if folks want to do this and it works for them. That's fine. But my concern is how it might affect our healthcare system.
I always get really interested in these stories whenever experts tell us not to check ourselves. It's kind of like with the breast cancer thing a few years back, where they said, before we told you ought to get a breast exam about every 3 years, but now we think that most people only need to do it every 10 years. I immediately get cynical whenever I hear that. I like the idea that people have the opportunity to go check, and I would much rather have a false positive than miss a true cancer situation. I'd say make it more available to the public.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go that route. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I've seen people with false positive stuff, and they test you, they probe you, and then they find out, you go through all the mental trauma of thinking that you have something serious, and then you find out you don't, which is ultimately a good thing. But yeah, I've seen it, people go through a lot of stuff just because for something that they thought was serious, it ended up not. But at the end of the day, you're fine. The news is good, so I guess you might as well just just go through it. But yeah, like Alex said, I don't know that I'd do it too often though. When I was at the University of North Dakota, when some of the hockey players would get drafted, it was before a team would pick them up, they would actually scan like all the athletes, run them through an MRI just to make sure there was no surprises. So in that case, at least in the sports area, that's been going on for a while though.
So it's good enough for possible multi-million-dollar athletes, but not good enough for the average Joe.
Could be. I mean, the other thing is that, relative to the population, like how many MRI machines are available. If I was the MRI industry, I would be like getting my salesman out there, like the cranberry salesman. Like, yeah, you like black lunch, you put some cranberry in it. If I was the MRI industry, I'd be like, yeah, everybody needs an MRI scan. Let's go. Um, all right, so in the East Coast and possibly the Midwest, I don't know. Just there's some road signs, where they're the digital signs that hang over overpasses. Apparently, the people who operate these have been putting humorous messages on the signs in order to encourage people to buckle up and not drink and drive. Examples of this are, use ya blinker, and they spelled, YAH, BLINKAH, like with like
Boston,
East Coast accent or something, like, use your blinker. And it's, it was kind of humorous, but apparently the federal government didn't think it was that funny. And so now the Federal Highway Administration says, they're cracking down on the funny signs. What do you think? Do you think, they should do it, or do you think they should allow it?
It's just a buzzkill. It doesn't sound like there's any solid data saying they reduce the safety of the roads. If anything, it seems to get people more interested in following the rules. I think if the end justifies the means in any case, it might be this one. Tell somebody a joke and they use their turn signal. I'd say just leave them alone. Let them post whatever they want on their signs. As long as everyone can understand it, so what?
Yeah, I don't get too excited about this one. I'm not about to write our congressman and, express my frustration. If the states want to have this, that's fine. It kind of irks me how the federal government is trying to mandate all the states. Right now there's 4 states, California, Indiana, Montana, and Tennessee, who can fund their roads, their highways, and their interstates 100% through their state revenue. So I think it's none of the federal government's business. Now, if some states were getting federal funds to maintain their roads, then yeah, maybe the federal government could have a say there, but let the states do what they want.
Lighten up, Francis. I can't believe people are getting all excited about this. I don't know when the last time you gentlemen have flown, but when you watch those safety videos on the airplane, they have gotten funnier and funnier and funnier over the years. And if you're going to start buzz killing on the highway, they'll probably start buzz killing these safety announcements on airplanes as well. It's like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that just irritates the citizenry.
Yeah, the only big problem I can see is if you're new to English and you're like, what does that sign say? But that's about the only thing. The other thing is that, do the safety messages on Boeing airplanes, are those still humorous, or are those pretty serious? That's what I'd like to know. It's like, we're not joking around because something's gonna break, so you better pay attention. All right. Let's see here. All right, last one. I thought this was intriguing, and this doesn't necessarily have to apply to chickens. So, is that many pet owners claim to be in tune with their dogs or cats' emotions, while many non-pet owners likely roll their eyes at these claims. New research suggests that interspecies emotional communication, that's for you, Joe, being a counselor, may not be so far-fetched after all. Scientists at the University of Queensland have found that humans can read the emotions of chickens by listening carefully. The authors discovered that a group of people were able to determine if the chickens were excited or displeased by listening to the sound of their clucks. Alex, what are your cats saying to you these days?
Usually I'm hungry, but for the most part, yeah, I absolutely agree with the conclusion. I mean, unless you're talking about earthworms or something, larger mammals, bigger creatures, they're alive. They can express what they want to you. They can tell you if they're upset or unhappy about something, or they're really happy about things. My cats meow differently when they're real excited or when they're just really upset. So I think, not saying that there's some telepathic bond going on between, people and their dogs, but I think it's relatively easy to tell when your animal friends are having a bad time.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole bunch of like Dr. Doolittles out there who can talk to animals. I don't think there's this like innate ability for some folks to understand how happy or sad animals are. When a cat hisses at me, I can with pretty good accuracy tell you it's upset, or when it's purring, it's probably pretty happy. So, like Alex said, you can probably tell, based on their clucks. What I'm curious about is if they ever get any like AI technology where large farms can determine if, their chickens are happy or if they're sad, and then maybe they can make adjustments to increase the yield of their chicken eggs, which might be kind of good for the world. Then also there's probably another signaling opportunity here, for all those folks that like to buy eggs with labels like free range or cage free or ethically sourced, organic, whatever. Now you can put like give an emotional state score of the chickens on the label. So it'll be interesting to see where this one goes.
I have a barn cat, and last night I was doing my chores, and I have to take this time of year I have to take warm water out for the small animals, and I was trying to open the door to the barn. I got these 2 buckets, and the barn cat comes running in behind me, and I did have a headlamp on, but I hadn't turned on the light in the barn yet, and I stepped on her tail, and she expressed incredible displeasure with my foot. And emotionally, I understood exactly what she was going through.
Dr.
I also
Doolittle.
say is that for many of my animals, I have found that in the last 3 seconds of their life, they are really distressed. So their communication to me is that they really want to live longer than the next 3 seconds before they become members of my freezer camp.
That was dark.
Yeah, that turned real dark.
I guess it reminds me of that Saturday Night Live where they put that helmet on your pet, and then they can read its mind. And most people found, or the people in the skit discovered that their pet was not politically, their political ideology was different from the pet owners. So if somebody was going to vote for Donald Trump, their pet was like a Joe Biden supporter, and vice versa. And so all of a sudden now you're looking at your pet in like a weird way. So I mean, I can I can definitely tell when the dog and the chickens are upset with me. But for this to be really shocking, it would have to be able to it's like so you're gonna vote for who, and then it's all tense. You're having a political discussion with your animal. But it just reminded me of that Saturday Night Live skit. I thought was pretty funny. So
Makes dispatching chickens a lot easier.
or harder, maybe. I don't know. It's like so. All
I
right.
only dispatch animals that are mean, selfish, greedy, mean-spirited. And to be honest with you, most of them actually just commit suicide.
Really?
2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head, right?
Yikes. All right. Well, okay. So, Joe won again, but we don't talk about that anymore. So, so that's it for a fairly brief episode 104, and we'll do this again next week.